Sarah Chen's eyes snapped open at 3:47 a.m., not from a nightmare but from the harsh buzz of her encrypted satellite phone, a device that hadn't made a sound in over 2 years. The former Army strategic planning officer rolled out of bed. In her remote Montana cabin, muscle memory kicking in as she answered, with practiced efficiency, "Chin here." The voice on the other end belonged to Colonel Marcus Reed, her former commanding officer, and the tremor in his usually steady tone sent ice through her veins. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully and don't ask questions until I'm finished." At 11:30 p.m. Eastern, coordinated attacks began in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Initial reports suggested terrorism, but within 4 hours the attackers had multiplied exponentially. The infected, and yes, I said infected, aren't behaving like anything we've seen in horror movies. They're organized, Sarah. They're hunting in coordinated packs, using basic flanking maneuvers, and showing tactical awareness that suggests retention of some cognitive function. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the information, her strategic training automatically analyzing the implications. "Sir, if they're coordinated, then traditional evacuation and containment protocols will fail. We'd be treating this like a natural disaster when it's actually warfare." Reed's voice carried a grim satisfaction. "Exactly why I called you. The CDC is calling it a highly aggressive pathogen with neurological complications, but you and I both know what we're really dealing with. The military is struggling because they're applying conventional crowd control and disaster response tactics to an enemy that's adapting faster than our standard protocols can handle. Every major city is implementing evacuation procedures, but the infected are anticipating escape routes and cutting off civilian movements with what can only be described as tactical precision." The weight of the situation settled on Sarah's shoulders like familiar armor. She moved to her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard as she began accessing secure networks she'd hoped never to use again. "What's the current status of military response?" she asked, pulling up satellite feeds and emergency communications channels. Reed's bitter laugh told her everything she needed to know. Conventional forces are being overwhelmed because they're fighting an enemy that doesn't follow the rules of engagement. The infected don't retreat when taking casualties, they don't respond to intimidation tactics, and they're using human shields, not intentionally, but because they're converting civilians faster than we can evacuate them. Standard military doctrine is failing because it's designed to fight thinking enemies who want to preserve their own forces. Sarah's screen filled with real-time data streams, emergency broadcasts, military communications, and civilian reports painting a picture of coordinated chaos across the country. "Sir, I'm seeing patterns in the attack timing and locations. This isn't random outbreak spreading from patient zero. Multiple simultaneous start points, synchronized timing, targeting of strategic infrastructure. If I didn't know better, I'd say this was a coordinated military operation." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for long seconds before Reed responded. "That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say. Sarah, I need you to activate your old network. Every strategist, every tactical specialist, every person we trained who's still breathing. We need to approach this like the war it actually is, not the disaster everyone thinks it is." As Sarah began composing encrypted messages to contacts across the country, she realized the full scope of what Reed was asking. He wasn't just requesting her help, he was asking her to build a resistance network from scratch, to coordinate civilian and military assets in a way that had never been attempted before. "Sir, if we're going to do this right, we need intelligence first. Real tactical intelligence about enemy capabilities, movement patterns, and weaknesses. We need to establish secure communication networks, coordinate with local law enforcement and military units that are still operational, and most importantly, we need to change how people think about this threat." Reed's voice carried the first note of hope she'd heard since the call began. "I've already identified 12 key personnel who are still in position and operational. Dr. Marcus Webb at the CDC has been tracking infection patterns and has critical biological intelligence. Jake Morrison, remember him from the Afghan operations? He's been running civilian survival training in Colorado and has contacts throughout the mountain states. If anyone can build a strategic response network, it's your team." Sarah stared at the growing list of contacts on her screen, each name representing a piece of the puzzle humanity would need to solve if they were going to survive this threat. The infected might be coordinated, but they were still driven by basic impulses and biological imperatives. Humans had something the infected didn't, the ability to adapt, plan, and work together toward long-term strategic goals. "Sir, I'll need complete operational autonomy and access to all available intelligence resources. If we're going to fight this war, we're going to fight it smart. Reed's response came without hesitation. You have it. Sarah, the country is counting on strategic minds like yours. Don't let us down. As the call ended, Sarah Chin looked out at the pre-dawn darkness, knowing that by sunrise she would be leading a fight for the very survival of human civilization. Dr. Marcus Webb's hands trembled as he stared at the epidemiological data streaming across his CDC workstation, the infection spread patterns defying every model he'd ever studied. The pathogen wasn't following natural disease progression. It was moving with purpose, creating corridors of infection that seemed designed to funnel survivors toward specific locations. When Sarah Chen's encrypted message appeared on his secure terminal at 4:15 a.m., Webb felt the first spark of hope he'd experienced in 18 hours of watching civilization collapse in real time. Dr. Webb, this is Colonel Sarah Chin, former Army Strategic Planning. I believe you have information we need, and we have a framework that can put your intelligence to strategic use. The infected aren't spreading randomly, they're following a pattern, and patterns can be predicted, countered, and ultimately defeated. Webb immediately initiated a secure video conference, his tired eyes meeting Sarah's determined gaze across the digital divide. Colonel Chin, I've been tracking the infection vectors since the first reports came in. What we're seeing isn't just unprecedented, it's impossible according to traditional epidemiological models. The infected are exhibiting collective behavior patterns, moving in coordinated groups toward population centers, but avoiding certain geographic features and infrastructure types. They're not just hunting randomly, they're hurting survivors. Sarah's expression sharpened with professional interest. Doctor, that's not pathogen behavior, that's tactical deployment. If they're hurting survivors, they're driving them toward something specific. What kind of locations are they avoiding? As Webb shared his data, the picture became terrifyingly clear. The infected were systematically avoiding areas with specific electromagnetic signatures, certain industrial facilities, and regions with particular topographical features. They're avoiding radio towers, power substations, and areas with high electromagnetic activity, Webb explained, his voice gaining confidence as he realized the implications. But they're also avoiding elevated positions with clear sight lines and natural choke points. It's as if they retain enough tactical awareness to recognize strategic disadvantages. Sarah nodded grimly. That's exactly what it is. Doctor, I need you to compile every piece of data you have on their movement patterns, avoidance behaviors, and any biological vulnerabilities you've identified. We're building a strategic response network, and your intelligence will be crucial for operational planning. 1,500 miles away in the Colorado Rockies, Jake Morrison received Sarah's message while conducting a dawn patrol around his survival training compound. The former Navy SEAL had been watching the chaos unfold on news feeds, his military instincts recognizing the tactical nature of the infected movements long before official sources acknowledged the threat's coordinated nature. When his encrypted satellite phone buzzed with Sarah's message, Jake felt the familiar rush of operational clarity that came with having a mission and a team. Sarah, it's Jake. I've got 43 trained civilians here at the compound, plus contacts throughout the Mountain States. We've been monitoring the situation, and you're right, this isn't random outbreak behavior. The infected are using terrain and infrastructure in ways that suggest tactical awareness. Jake's deep voice carried across the conference call as he joined Sarah and Dr. Webb. I've been analyzing their movement patterns from a tactical perspective, and they're employing classic military strategies adapted for their capabilities. They're using natural terrain features to mask their approach, they're coordinating multi-directional attacks to prevent escape, and they're demonstrating what can only be described as battlefield intelligence. Sarah felt the pieces of her strategic puzzle beginning to align. Jake, what's your assessment of their weaknesses from a tactical standpoint? Jake's response came without hesitation. They're strong in direct confrontation and overwhelming in numbers, but they're vulnerable to coordinated defensive strategies. They don't seem to anticipate complex multi-layered tactics, and they're predictable in their response to certain stimuli. Most importantly, they're still driven by basic impulses that can be exploited by strategic thinking. As the three-way conversation continued, Sarah realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, a strategic alliance between military tactical expertise, scientific intelligence, and civilian survival networks. Dr. Webb's epidemiological data provided the foundation for understanding enemy capabilities and limitations. Jake's tactical analysis offered insights into battlefield strategy, and Sarah's strategic planning experience gave them the framework to coordinate a response. We need to establish secure communication networks with other survivor groups and remaining military units, Sarah explained, her mind already working through the operational requirements. Jake, I need you to reach out to your contacts and identify potential safe zones and rally points. Dr. Webb, I need continuous intelligence updates on infection patterns and any changes in their behavior. The conversation was interrupted by urgent updates from all three locations. Webb's CDC monitoring systems were detecting massive movement of infected groups toward major highway intersections. Jake's lookouts were reporting organized zombie formations moving through the mountain passes, and Sarah's intelligence feeds were showing coordinated attacks on communication infrastructure across multiple states. They're not just hunting, Sarah realized with growing alarm. They're conducting a systematic campaign to isolate survivor groups and prevent coordinated resistance. This isn't just infection spread, it's conquest. Webb's voice carried new urgency. Colonel, if they're targeting communication infrastructure, they're trying to prevent exactly what we're doing right now. They're trying to keep us from organizing. Jake's tactical assessment was grimmer still. Sarah, if they're this organized, we need to move fast. Every hour we delay gives them more time to position themselves and cut off our potential allies. Sarah stared at the tactical display on her screen, watching red markers representing infected movements create an increasingly complex web across the American landscape. The enemy was adaptive, organized, and systematically dismantling humanity's ability to coordinate resistance. But for the first time since the crisis began, she had the foundation of a strategic response, scientific intelligence, tactical expertise, and the beginning of a communication network that could turn scattered survivors into a coordinated resistance force. Gentlemen, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to prove that human strategic thinking can overcome any threat, no matter how organized or numerous. The infected may be coordinated, but they're still predictable. And predictable enemies can be defeated. As dawn broke across 3 time zones, Sarah Chen's resistance network took its first coordinated steps toward changing the tide of humanity's darkest hour. 48 hours after the initial network formation, Sarah Chen's resistance operation had transformed her Montana cabin into a strategic command center that would have impressed Pentagon planners. Multiple screens displayed real-time feeds from drones, security cameras, and satellite imagery, while encrypted communications channels buzzed with reports from reconnaissance teams across 7 states. The intelligence picture emerging from their coordinated observation efforts was both encouraging and terrifying in equal measure. Jake, what's the status on your mountain reconnaissance teams? Sarah asked, her voice carrying the focused intensity of a commander who knew that every piece of information could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Jake Morrison's gravelly voice crackled through the secure channel from his Colorado compound. We've got 12 teams operating in 6-hour shifts, maintaining continuous surveillance on 3 major zombie formations. The patterns are becoming clearer, Sarah. They're most active between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., with peak activity around midnight. During daylight hours, they seek cover in buildings, underground areas, and dense forest cover. They're not just avoiding sunlight, they're actively seeking tactical concealment. Sarah's tactical mind immediately began processing the implications. That gives us operational windows. What about their response to environmental factors? Jake's response came with the precision of a military briefing. Temperature affects their speed and coordination. Below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, their movement becomes sluggish and their coordination breaks down. Above 80 degrees, they show increased aggression but reduced endurance. Rain and snow seem to confuse their tracking abilities, but wind carries scent information that makes them more effective hunters. Dr. Webb's voice joined the conversation from his CDC laboratory, where he'd been analyzing biological samples and infection data around the clock. I've been correlating Jake's field observations with laboratory analysis, and we're seeing consistent patterns in their biological responses. The infected retain enough neural function to process complex environmental information, but they're operating on simplified decision-making protocols. They respond predictably to specific stimuli, loud noises draw them in groups, but certain frequency ranges actually repel them. We've identified electromagnetic fields that interfere with their coordination, and specific chemical compounds that mask human scent signatures. Sarah felt the first real surge of tactical optimism since the crisis began. Doctor, if we can predict their responses to environmental stimuli, we can manipulate their movements. Jake, what about their tactical vulnerabilities? Jake's field teams had been conducting systematic observations of zombie combat behavior, documenting their responses to different defensive strategies. They're incredibly dangerous in direct confrontation, but they have exploitable weaknesses. They don't anticipate complex multi-layered defenses, they're vulnerable to coordinated flanking attacks, and they can be manipulated using noise and scent diversions. Most importantly, they follow predictable attack patterns when engaging fortified positions. They focus on the most obvious entry points and don't adapt quickly to changing defensive strategies. Sarah began sketching tactical diagrams on her digital planning board. So we can predict their attack patterns and prepare layered defenses that exploit their predictable responses. What about their communication methods? Dr. Webb's research had revealed disturbing information about the infected's coordination mechanisms. They're using a combination of chemical signals and low-frequency vocalizations that operate below normal human hearing range. We can detect these signals using specialized equipment, which means we can potentially intercept their coordination communications. Even more importantly, we might be able to disrupt their command and control systems using targeted electromagnetic interference. The implications hit Sarah immediately. If we can disrupt their communications, we can break up their coordinated attacks and force them back into individual threat levels that conventional tactics can handle. The conversation was interrupted by urgent reports from their expanding network of civilian observers. Citizens with amateur radio equipment, security system access, and basic surveillance gear were providing real-time intelligence on zombie movements throughout the region. Sarah, this is Tom Bradley in Denver. We've got a massive formation moving south on Interstate 25. Estimated 300 infected, moving in coordinated groups of 20 to 30. They're maintaining formation discipline and avoiding obvious ambush points along the route. Sarah's command center immediately began coordinating response from multiple observation teams. Jake, can you get eyes on that formation? I need confirmation of their tactical behavior and movement patterns. Within minutes, Jake's reconnaissance teams were providing detailed intelligence on the zombie formation's movement. Sarah, they're not just moving randomly. They're conducting route reconnaissance, sending small groups ahead to check potential ambush sites, and they're maintaining communication between different elements of their formation. This isn't migration, it's a military advance. Dr. Webb's voice carried new urgency. Colonel, we're seeing similar formations in 4 other states. Large groups moving toward population centers, but they're using military-style movement techniques. They're learning from their encounters with human defensive positions. Sarah stared at the tactical display showing zombie movements across the western United States, red arrows indicating coordinated advances toward major cities and survivor settlements. The enemy was evolving, but so was humanity's response. Gentlemen, we've gathered enough intelligence to understand what we're fighting. The infected retain tactical awareness and coordination capabilities, but they're operating on predictable patterns. They have biological vulnerabilities we can exploit, environmental factors that affect their performance, and communication systems we can potentially disrupt. Jake's voice carried grim satisfaction. Sarah, what's the operational plan? Sarah's response came with the confidence of a strategic commander who had found her enemy's weaknesses. We're going to prove that human intelligence and coordination can overcome any threat, no matter how organized. It's time to stop gathering intelligence and start using it. As the intelligence briefing concluded, Sarah Chen looked at the comprehensive tactical picture her network had assembled in just 48 hours. The infected were dangerous, organized, and adaptive, but they were also predictable, vulnerable to environmental manipulation, and dependent on communication systems that could be disrupted. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity had the intelligence foundation needed to fight back strategically rather than simply react defensively. The war was about to change from survival to victory. The emergency broadcast from Refuge Point, Wyoming came at 2:14 a.m., cutting through the static of Sarah Chen's command center with desperate urgency. This is Mayor Patricia Valdez at Refuge Point. We have approximately 800 survivors holed up in the old mining complex, but we're surrounded by what looks like a coordinated zombie force of over 300. They're not attacking randomly, they're maintaining a perimeter and systematically probing our defenses. We estimate 48 hours before they find a way in. Sarah's tactical mind immediately began processing the situation, recognizing this as the perfect opportunity to test her network's intelligence and coordination capabilities against a real tactical scenario. Jake, Dr. Webb, emergency conference now, Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the authority of a commander who had found her moment to prove that strategic thinking could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Within minutes, the 3-person command structure was analyzing the Refuge Point situation through multiple intelligence feeds. Jake's drone reconnaissance revealed that the zombie force had established what could only be described as a tactical siege perimeter around the mining complex, with groups positioned at all major approach routes and escape corridors. Sarah, they're not just surrounding the survivors randomly. They've identified the most defensible positions and are systematically testing weak points in the perimeter. This is military-style siege warfare adapted for their capabilities. Dr. Webb's analysis of the zombie formation revealed crucial intelligence that would shape their entire operational approach. Colonel, the infected force shows classic pack hierarchy behavior with larger, more aggressive individuals directing smaller groups. But more importantly, they're maintaining their formation using the low-frequency communication signals we identified. If we can disrupt their command structure, the entire siege formation should collapse into individual threat levels. Sarah stared at the tactical display, seeing not just a crisis but an opportunity to prove that human strategic thinking could turn the tide of this war. Gentlemen, we're going to conduct the first coordinated strategic strike against an organized zombie force. Jake, what's our operational timeline? Jake's assessment was grimly efficient. We need to move within 36 hours. I can coordinate with my mountain teams to establish overwatch positions around the mining complex, and we've got civilian volunteers who can help with equipment and supplies. But Sarah, we're talking about a complex multi-phase operation against an enemy that's proven they can adapt to conventional tactics. Sarah's response came with the confidence of a strategist who had spent days analyzing enemy weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Jake, that's exactly why this is going to work. We're not using conventional tactics. We're using intelligence-based strategy designed specifically for their behavioral patterns and vulnerabilities. The operational plan that emerged from their planning session was unprecedented in its scope and coordination. Phase 1 would involve Jake's teams establishing concealed observation positions around the zombie perimeter, using specialized equipment to monitor their low-frequency communications and identify command elements within the formation. Phase 2 would deploy Dr. Webb's electromagnetic interference devices to disrupt zombie coordination at precisely calculated intervals, breaking their siege formation into smaller, manageable groups. Phase 3 would execute coordinated noise diversions and scent masking to manipulate zombie movement patterns, drawing them away from the mining complex and into prepared kill zones. The key is timing and coordination, Sarah explained to her expanded network of volunteers and military contacts who had joined the operation. We're not trying to outfight them, we're trying to outsmart them. Every element of this operation is designed to exploit their predictable behavioral responses and turn their own coordination against them. The preparation phase revealed just how much the resistance network had evolved from desperate survivors into a functioning military organization. Civilian volunteers with electronics expertise assembled electromagnetic interference devices based on Dr. Webb's specifications, while Jake's survival training graduates established supply caches and communication relay points throughout the operational area. As the teams moved into position under cover of darkness, Sarah found herself commanding a complex tactical operation that would have challenged professional military units. Her command center received continuous updates from 12 different observation teams, 3 drone operators, and specialized technical units monitoring zombie communications. All units, this is command. Operation Shepherd's Hook is commencing Phase 1. Remember, we're not just fighting for Refuge Point, we're proving that human strategic thinking can overcome any organized threat. The first phase unfolded with precision that surprised even Sarah's experienced tactical mind. Jake's teams established their positions without detection. Dr. Webb's monitoring equipment successfully intercepted zombie communication signals, and the technical teams confirmed that electromagnetic interference devices were functioning within optimal parameters. Command, this is Overwatch Team Alpha. We have clear identification of command elements within the zombie formation. 3 large individuals are directing movement patterns for the entire siege perimeter. If we can eliminate or isolate these command elements, the entire formation should lose coordination. Dr. Webb's voice carried excitement as his equipment detected the exact frequencies being used for zombie coordination. Sarah, we're not just monitoring their communications, we're decoding their tactical decision-making process. They're using basic but effective military principles, but they're vulnerable to disruption tactics they've never encountered before. Sarah felt the weight of command responsibility as she prepared to give the order that would launch humanity's first strategic offensive against the zombie threat. All units, prepare for Phase 2. We're about to prove that intelligence and coordination will always triumph over brute force and numbers. The electromagnetic interference devices activated simultaneously across the operational area, sending carefully calibrated signals designed to disrupt zombie coordination without affecting human communication systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The organized siege formation began to fragment as individual zombie groups lost contact with their command elements. Command, this is Overwatch Team Bravo. The siege perimeter is collapsing. Zombie groups are breaking formation and moving erratically. Phase 2 is successful. Sarah's tactical display showed the zombie force transforming from an organized military threat into scattered groups of individual targets that conventional defensive tactics could handle. All units, commence Phase 3. Execute noise diversions and guide zombie groups into prepared positions. The final phase of Operation Shepherd's Hook demonstrated the power of strategic thinking applied to zombie warfare. Coordinated noise generators drew the confused zombie groups away from the mining complex, while scent masking techniques prevented them from regrouping. Jake's teams engaged the dispersed zombie groups using coordinated flanking attacks and prepared defensive positions, eliminating the threat with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. As dawn broke over Refuge Point, Sarah Chin watched her tactical display show the first successful strategic victory against an organized zombie force. The siege had been broken, 800 survivors had been rescued, and most importantly, the resistance network had proven that human strategic thinking could overcome even the most coordinated zombie threat. All units, this is Command. Operation Shepherd's Hook is complete. We've just proven that this war can be won through intelligence, coordination, and strategic thinking. Today we stopped running and started fighting back. The success of Operation Shepherd's Hook sent shockwaves through the survivor networks faster than any official communication could have achieved. Within 72 hours of the Refuge Point victory, Sarah Chen's encrypted channels were flooded with messages from survivor groups across the continent, each desperate to learn the tactical methods that had achieved the impossible, a decisive victory against organized zombie forces. Colonel Chen, this is Captain Maria Santos, former Air Force, commanding 67 survivors in Tucson. We monitored your operation through emergency radio channels. We need to know how you coordinated electromagnetic interference with tactical maneuvers. We're facing a similar siege situation here. Sarah stared at her communication board, watching dozens of similar requests scroll past, and realized that victory had created an entirely new challenge, the need to rapidly expand and systematize their strategic approach. Dr. Webb's voice carried exhausted excitement as he briefed Sarah on the intelligence windfall from their successful operation. Sarah, we captured hours of zombie communication data during the Refuge Point operation. Their coordination methods are more sophisticated than we initially understood, but they're also more vulnerable to disruption than we hoped. The electromagnetic interference didn't just break their formation, it caused them to revert to individual hunting behaviors that are far less effective against prepared defenses. Jake's tactical assessment was equally encouraging. Colonel, we've proven that coordinated human strategy can overcome zombie coordination, but now we need to scale these methods to handle multiple operations simultaneously. The demand for our tactical support is already exceeding our current operational capacity. Sarah's strategic mind immediately grasped the implications of their success. They had moved beyond proving that strategic resistance was possible. Now they needed to build a systematic approach that could train and coordinate resistance efforts across the entire continent. Gentlemen, we're transitioning from proving concept to building movement. We need to establish training protocols, communication networks, and resource distribution systems that can support coordinated resistance operations on a national scale. The challenge was unprecedented, transforming scattered survivors into a disciplined military organization while fighting an ongoing war against an adaptive enemy. The solution emerged through a combination of military doctrine and innovative adaptation to post-apocalyptic conditions. Sarah established regional training centers at secure locations, where Jake survival experts could teach civilian volunteers the tactical principles that had proven effective against zombie forces. We're not trying to turn civilians into soldiers, Jake explained to a group of 40 volunteers at the First Colorado Training Center. We're teaching strategic thinking, coordination techniques, and tactical awareness that will keep you alive and help you protect other survivors. Every person who learns these methods becomes a force multiplier for the entire resistance movement. Dr. Webb's scientific approach proved equally crucial to the resistance expansion. His team developed field-deployable versions of the electromagnetic interference devices, along with simplified guides for identifying zombie communication patterns and behavioral vulnerabilities. The key is giving local resistance groups the tools and knowledge they need to analyze their specific threats and develop appropriate tactical responses, Webb explained to Sarah during a strategic planning session. We can't command every operation from Montana, but we can provide the intelligence framework that allows local groups to make effective strategic decisions. The communication network expansion revealed both the scope of the survivor population and the complexity of coordinating resistance efforts across vast distances. Sarah's team established relay stations using a combination of ham radio operators, satellite communication equipment, and secure internet connections that had survived the initial chaos. We're creating a distributed command structure that can coordinate operations without creating single points of failure, Sarah explained to her expanding command staff. Each regional group maintains operational autonomy while sharing intelligence and coordinating larger strategic efforts through our network. The first coordinated multi-region operation tested the resistance network's expanded capabilities against a zombie threat that was itself evolving and adapting. Intelligence reports indicated that zombie forces were beginning to avoid areas where electromagnetic interference had been used, suggesting they were learning from their defeats and developing countermeasures. Sarah, we're seeing behavioral changes in zombie formations across multiple states, Dr. Webb reported with concern. They're maintaining larger distances from known human settlements, using different communication frequencies, and showing increased caution when approaching areas where they've previously encountered organized resistance. Jake's assessment of the evolving tactical situation was characteristically direct. The enemy is adapting faster than we anticipated. Our electromagnetic interference is still effective, but they're beginning to develop alternative coordination methods. We need to stay ahead of their adaptation curve by continuously evolving our own tactics and strategies. Sarah realized that the resistance movement had reached a critical juncture. They had proven that strategic thinking could defeat zombie coordination, but now they faced an enemy that was learning from those defeats and developing new capabilities. The expansion phase culminated in the establishment of standardized training programs, equipment manufacturing capabilities, and strategic doctrine that could be implemented by resistance groups without direct oversight from Sarah's core team. Former military personnel like Captain Santos in Tucson became regional coordinators, training local volunteers and coordinating with neighboring groups to establish mutual support networks. Civilian volunteers with technical expertise established workshops for producing electromagnetic interference devices, while others with communication skills maintained the growing network of intelligence sharing and tactical coordination. We've moved from desperate survival to strategic resistance, Sarah announced during her first nationwide broadcast to resistance groups across the continent. Every group that adopts our tactical methods, every volunteer who learns strategic thinking, every community that establishes coordinated defenses, you're all part of proving that human intelligence and cooperation will ultimately triumph over any threat, no matter how organized or adaptive. The resistance movement had evolved from Sarah's small network into a continental organization that was systematically reclaiming territory from zombie control and providing hope that civilization could be rebuilt stronger and more resilient than before. As reports continued flooding in from resistance operations across the country, Sarah Chin looked at her tactical displays showing green markers indicating successful defensive operations, blue markers showing training centers and safe communities, and red markers showing remaining zombie strongholds that were now targets for coordinated elimination rather than threats to be avoided. The war was far from over, but humanity had stopped running and started winning. The question was no longer whether they could survive the zombie threat, but how quickly they could eliminate it and begin rebuilding a civilization that had learned the crucial importance of strategic thinking, coordination, and collective defense. Dr. Webb's voice carried an urgency that cut through the routine morning briefing like an alarm bell, transforming Sarah Chen's Montana Command Center from Comm Coordination Hub to Crisis Management Center in seconds. Sarah, we have a situation that makes everything we've faced look manageable. Satellite imagery and ground reports are showing massive zombie formations from 7 different regions all moving toward the Kansas City metropolitan area. We're talking about potentially 50,000 infected, all converging on a single point where approximately 200,000 survivors are currently sheltered. Sarah's tactical mind immediately grasped the catastrophic implications. If that many zombies successfully converged, they would create an unstoppable force that could roll across the continent, overrunning every human settlement in their path. Jake Morrison's assessment from his Colorado command post was grimly precise. Sarah, this isn't random migration. The timing is too coordinated, the routes are too efficient, and the formations are maintaining discipline across distances that shouldn't be possible with their known communication methods. They're being directed by something we haven't identified yet, and if they successfully converge, we'll be facing a mega-horde that no conventional defensive strategy can stop. Sarah stared at the satellite feeds showing red arrows indicating zombie movements from Texas, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, Iowa, Arkansas, and Colorado, all pointing toward Kansas City like spokes on a deadly wheel. The strategic implications hit Sarah with the force of professional revelation. This was exactly the kind of coordinated enemy operation that required coordinated Allied response on a scale never before attempted. Gentlemen, we're looking at either humanity's greatest disaster or our greatest opportunity to prove that strategic coordination can overcome any threat. If we can prevent this convergence, we break their largest offensive operation and demonstrate that human strategic thinking can outmaneuver even their most sophisticated coordination. Dr. Webb's voice carried both excitement and terror. Sarah, if we fail to stop this convergence, the resulting megahorde will be virtually unstoppable. But if we succeed in disrupting it, we'll have eliminated more zombie forces in a single operation than all our previous victories combined. The operational challenge was unprecedented in scope and complexity, coordinating resistance groups across 7 states to execute simultaneous tactical operations designed to redirect massive zombie formations away from their convergence point. Sarah's expanded command network immediately began reaching out to every trained resistance cell, military unit, and civilian volunteer group within operational range. This is Colonel Chen to all resistance networks. We are implementing Operation Scattered Wind, a coordinated strategic response to prevent zombie megahorde formation. Every regional group will receive specific tactical objectives designed to redirect zombie movements away from Kansas City convergence. Captain Maria Santos's voice from Tucson carried the determination of a commander who understood the stakes. Colonel, Arizona resistance groups are positioned to implement noise diversions along the northern migration route. We have electromagnetic interference capabilities and coordinated drone support ready for deployment. Similar confirmations flooded in from resistance groups across the operational area, former military personnel, trained civilian volunteers, and technical specialists, all coordinating for humanity's largest strategic operation against the zombie threat. The tactical plan that emerged from frantic coordination sessions represented strategic thinking on a scale that would have challenged major military operations. Phase 1 involved coordinated electromagnetic interference across all 7 zombie formations simultaneously, designed to break their long-range coordination and force them back to localized communication methods. Phase 2 implemented systematic noise campaigns to redirect zombie movements away from Kansas City using carefully positioned audio devices, explosive diversions, and coordinated vehicle movements. Phase 3 established kill zones and choke points along the redirected routes, allowing resistance groups to engage zombie formations in small, manageable segments rather than facing the full convergence. Dr. Webb's scientific analysis provided the crucial timing calculations that would determine success or failure. Sarah, we have approximately 18 hours before the first formations reach the convergence point. The electromagnetic interference must be implemented simultaneously across all formations, or the unaffected groups will compensate for the disrupted ones. We get one chance to break their coordination. If we fail, they'll adapt their methods and we won't get another opportunity. Jake's tactical assessment was equally precise. Colonel, we're coordinating 12 different resistance groups across 7 states, each implementing complex tactical operations while maintaining communication and timing synchronization. This is the most ambitious military operation attempted since the crisis began. The execution phase began at precisely 2 a.m. Central Time, with electromagnetic interference devices activating simultaneously across zombie formations stretching from the Texas Panhandle to the Iowa border. Sarah's command center monitored the operation through dozens of communication channels, drone feeds, and satellite imagery, watching humanity's greatest strategic gamble unfold in real time. All stations, this is command. Operation Scattered Wind is commence. Remember, we're not just preventing a catastrophe, we're proving that human coordination and strategic thinking can overcome any threat, regardless of scale or complexity. The initial results exceeded even Sarah's optimistic projections. The massive zombie formations immediately began losing coordination as their long-range communication systems were disrupted, breaking into smaller groups that resumed local pack behavior patterns. Command, this is Texas Regional. The southern formation is fragmenting exactly as predicted. They're breaking into groups of 50 to 100 and showing confusion about directional movement. Similar reports came in from all 7 operational areas. The megahorde convergence was collapsing before it could form. Phase 2 implementation demonstrated the power of coordinated strategic thinking applied on a continental scale. Noise diversions activated in carefully calculated sequences, drawing the confused zombie groups away from Kansas City and toward prepared defensive positions where resistance groups could engage them using proven tactical methods. Command, this is Nebraska Regional. Zombie groups are responding to audio diversions and moving toward our prepared kill zones. Local resistance teams are ready to engage using coordinated flanking tactics. As dawn broke across the American Midwest, Sarah Chin watched her tactical displays show the successful disruption of what could have been humanity's final defeat. The zombie megahorde had been prevented from forming, thousands of infected had been eliminated by coordinated resistance operations, and most importantly, the resistance network had proven that human strategic coordination could outmaneuver even the most sophisticated enemy operations. All stations, this is command. Operation Scattered Wind has achieved complete success. The convergence has been prevented, zombie formations have been neutralized, and Kansas City remains secure. Today we proved that human intelligence and coordination will always triumph over brute force, regardless of the scale of the threat. The success of Operation Scattered Wind represented more than just tactical victory. It demonstrated that the resistance movement had evolved into a functioning strategic organization capable of coordinating continental-scale operations against adaptive enemies. Sarah realized that they had crossed a crucial threshold from defensive survival to offensive strategic warfare, with the capability to not just resist zombie threats but to systematically eliminate them through coordinated intelligence and tactical superiority. 3 weeks after the triumph of Operation Scattered Wind, Dr. Webb's urgent voice shattered the confidence that had been building in Sarah Chen's command center since their continental victory. "Sarah, we have a problem that changes everything we thought we knew about the infected." Field reports from 7 different resistance groups are describing zombie behavior that shouldn't be possible based on our understanding of their cognitive limitations. They're not just adapting to our electromagnetic interference, they're actively countering it with what can only be described as tactical innovation. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach as she processed the implications, realizing that their greatest victory might have triggered an evolutionary leap in their enemy's capabilities. Jake Morrison's field report from a recent engagement in Nevada carried the grim precision of a soldier who had witnessed something that challenged his understanding of warfare itself. "Sarah, we attempted a standard electromagnetic disruption operation against a zombie formation outside of Reno. Not only did it fail to break their coordination, but they implemented immediate countermeasures. They dispersed their command elements to prevent centralized disruption, established backup communication methods using different frequencies, and most disturbing of all, they appeared to anticipate our flanking maneuvers before we could execute them." Sarah's strategic mind raced through the tactical implications. If the zombies were developing tactical intelligence that could counter human strategic thinking, every method they had developed might become obsolete. The intelligence reports flooding in from resistance networks across the continent painted a picture of an enemy that was evolving at an unprecedented rate. Captain Santos's voice from Arizona carried the frustration of a commander watching her tactical advantages disappear in real time. "Colonel, the infected formations in our sector are displaying strategic behaviors we've never encountered. They're using terrain features defensively, establishing what can only be called patrol patterns around human settlements, and showing the ability to learn from previous encounters with our forces. Yesterday they successfully predicted and countered a noise diversion operation that had worked flawlessly just 2 weeks ago." Dr. Webb's scientific analysis revealed the terrifying scope of the evolutionary change occurring in zombie populations across the country. "Sarah, we're not just seeing individual adaptation, we're witnessing accelerated collective learning that suggests they're sharing tactical information across vast distances. Zombie groups that have never encountered electromagnetic interference are arriving at engagement sites already prepared with countermeasures. They're developing institutional memory and strategic doctrine just like human military organizations." Sarah stared at the tactical display showing zombie formations that were no longer following predictable patterns, realizing that humanity faced an enemy that was rapidly approaching human-level tactical sophistication. The crisis reached its peak when Jake's teams encountered a zombie formation that demonstrated strategic capabilities that should have been impossible for infected organisms. "Sarah, we just faced a zombie force that was using advanced military tactics, coordinated suppression, tactical withdrawal, and what appeared to be deliberate deception operations. They feinted an attack on our eastern position while conducting a coordinated assault on our western flank using concealed approach routes we didn't know they had identified." Sarah's command staff fell silent as they processed the implications. Their enemy was no longer just coordinated, they were becoming strategically intelligent. The resistance network found itself facing the greatest challenge since the initial outbreak, an enemy that was rapidly evolving countermeasures to every tactical advantage humanity had developed. Regional commanders reported failed operations, unsuccessful electromagnetic interference attempts, and zombie formations that seem to anticipate human strategic thinking. Colonel Chin, this is Major Wilson from the Texas Resistance. We're seeing zombie formations that appear to be conducting their own reconnaissance operations. They're sending small groups to observe our defensive positions and communication patterns before launching coordinated attacks that exploit weaknesses we didn't know we had. Sarah realized that the resistance movement faced a critical decision point: continue using tactics that were rapidly becoming obsolete, or evolve their strategic approach faster than the zombies could adapt to counter it. Gentlemen, we're facing an enemy that's learning from our victories and developing countermeasures to our strategic advantages. But there's one thing they can't replicate or counter: human creativity, innovation, and the ability to completely change our approach when circumstances require it. The solution emerged from a combination of desperation and strategic insight. If zombies were learning to counter their existing tactics, humanity needed to develop entirely new approaches that exploited different vulnerabilities. Dr. Webb's breakthrough came from analyzing the biological mechanisms behind the zombies' enhanced cognitive abilities. Sarah, their increased tactical intelligence is coming at a cost. They're burning through biological resources at an unsustainable rate. The more sophisticated their behavior becomes, the more vulnerable they are to metabolic disruption. We can't outfight their tactical intelligence, but we can outlast their biological limitations. Jake's tactical assessment was equally crucial. Colonel, if they're developing strategic intelligence, they're also developing strategic weaknesses. Complex tactical thinking requires coordination, communication, and leadership structures that can be identified, targeted, and eliminated. The new operational approach that emerged from their crisis planning represented a fundamental shift in strategic thinking. Rather than trying to disrupt zombie coordination, they would exploit the vulnerabilities created by their enhanced intelligence. Operation Cognitive Override involved identifying and eliminating the enhanced zombie leaders that were directing their tactical evolution, forcing the formations back to simpler coordination methods that existing human tactics could counter. We're not fighting zombies anymore, Sarah explained to her continental network of resistance commanders. We're fighting an intelligent enemy that happens to be composed of infected humans. That means we can use psychological warfare, deception operations, and strategic misdirection to exploit their newfound intelligence against them. The first implementation of advanced psychological warfare against intelligent zombies achieved results that exceeded even Sarah's optimistic projections. By using coordinated misinformation campaigns, false retreat operations, and deliberate tactical deception, resistance groups successfully manipulated zombie forces into disadvantageous positions where their enhanced intelligence became a liability rather than an advantage. Command, this is Nevada Regional. The enhanced zombie formation fell for our false retreat operation completely. They're now trapped in a canyon position where their tactical intelligence can't help them, and we can eliminate them using conventional weapons and coordinated fire support. As reports of successful operations against intelligent zombie forces came in from across the continent, Sarah Chin realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They had out-evolved their evolutionary competition. All stations, this is Command. We have successfully adapted our strategic approach to counter zombie tactical intelligence. The enemy's greatest evolutionary leap has become their greatest vulnerability. Human creativity and strategic innovation will always outpace any adaptive threat, regardless of how intelligent or sophisticated it becomes. The turning point had been reached. Humanity was no longer just surviving or resisting, they were systematically defeating an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just weeks before. 6 months after the psychological warfare breakthrough that had turned intelligent zombies into defeated enemies, Sarah Chin stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Strategic Defense Center in what had once been Denver, Colorado, watching cargo aircraft deliver supplies to reconstruction sites that stretched to the horizon. The transformation of America from a zombie-infested wasteland to a network of fortified communities was proceeding ahead of every optimistic projection. But Sarah knew that the real victory wasn't just eliminating the zombie threat, it was building a civilization that could never again be caught unprepared for existential challenges. Dr. Webb's final epidemiological report confirmed what field observations had been indicating for weeks. The zombie threat was effectively eliminated as an organized force. Sarah, we've reached statistical elimination of coordinated zombie activity across the continental United States. Remaining infected individuals are operating as isolated threats that local defense forces can handle using standard protocols. More importantly, our biological analysis indicates that the enhanced intelligence mutations were unsustainable. the infected populations that developed tactical thinking burned through their biological resources and essentially evolved themselves into extinction. Sarah smiled grimly at the irony. Their most dangerous enemy had ultimately defeated itself through unsustainable evolutionary adaptation. Jake Morrison's voice carried satisfaction as he reported from the newly established National Training Academy in Montana, where civilian volunteers and former military personnel were learning the strategic thinking and coordination methods that had won the war. Sarah, we've got over 15,000 people who have completed our tactical training programs, and regional coordination centers are operational in 47 states. Every community that implements our defensive strategies and communication protocols becomes effectively immune to any future zombie-type threat. We're not just rebuilding, we're building better. Sarah nodded with pride, watching live feeds from training exercises where civilians demonstrated tactical coordination that would have impressed professional military units. The reconstruction effort had revealed just how dramatically the crisis had changed American society, creating communities that were more resilient, better coordinated, and more strategically aware than anything that had existed before the outbreak. Captain Santos, now Director of Regional Coordination for the Southwest, provided updates on the systematic reclamation of major metropolitan areas. Colonel, the Phoenix reconstruction is 6 weeks ahead of schedule. We've integrated defensive architecture, communication redundancy, and tactical coordination capabilities into every aspect of the urban planning. These cities aren't just being rebuilt, they're being designed to withstand any future crisis through strategic preparation and coordinated response capabilities. Sarah's communication center buzzed with reports from reconstruction projects across the continent, each representing the application of strategic thinking to civilian infrastructure. Agricultural communities were designing food production systems with multiple redundancies and defensive capabilities, while industrial centers were incorporating tactical coordination capabilities into manufacturing operations. We learned that survival requires more than just individual preparedness, Sarah explained to a gathering of regional coordinators. It requires systematic strategic thinking, coordinated response capabilities, and the institutional knowledge to maintain these systems across generations. The most significant achievement of the Reconstruction period was the establishment of the Continental Strategic Defense Network, a permanent system of communication, coordination, and rapid response capabilities designed to prevent any future crisis from achieving the devastating impact of the zombie outbreak. Regional command centers maintained constant communication with local communities, monitoring for any signs of emerging threats and coordinating immediate strategic responses. We're creating a civilization that thinks strategically at every level, Dr. Webb explained during a briefing on the integrated warning systems. From individual communities to continental coordination, every element of our society is designed to identify, analyze, and counter existential threats before they can achieve critical impact. The establishment of permanent strategic education programs ensured that the tactical knowledge and coordination capabilities developed during the crisis would be preserved and expanded for future generations. Universities offered degrees in strategic crisis management, while primary schools taught basic tactical thinking and coordination skills as part of standard curriculum. Every child growing up in rebuilt America will understand strategic thinking, coordination principles, and the importance of collective defense, Jake reported from the education integration programs. We're not just rebuilding civilization, we're creating a civilization that's immunized against the kind of coordinated threats that nearly destroyed us. International observers who arrived to study the American Reconstruction were amazed by the systematic integration of strategic thinking into every aspect of society. You've created something unprecedented, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez from the European Union's Crisis Response Analysis Team. A civilian society with military-level strategic coordination capabilities, designed to maintain peacetime productivity while maintaining constant readiness for existential threats. This isn't just reconstruction, it's evolutionary advancement in human social organization. As Sarah reviewed the comprehensive status reports from across the continent, she realized that the zombie crisis had ultimately created something that no peacetime society could have achieved, a civilization that had learned to think strategically, coordinate effectively, and respond rapidly to any threat. Communities that had once been vulnerable to any organized attack were now capable of implementing tactical countermeasures that could defeat enemies with military-level capabilities. The final status briefing confirmed what Sarah had hoped for since those first desperate hours when Colonel Reed's call had awakened her to humanity's greatest crisis. Continental threat assessment indicates zero probability of successful large-scale attack against current defensive capabilities, reported the Integrated Intelligence Network. Population centers demonstrate tactical coordination, strategic thinking, and rapid response capabilities that exceed pre-crisis military standards. American civilization has achieved comprehensive strategic immunity against coordinated threats. Sarah Chin looked out over the thriving communities that stretched across the American landscape, each one representing the application of strategic thinking to human survival and prosperity. The zombie threat that had seemed insurmountable just months before had been eliminated not through superior firepower or technological advantages, but through human intelligence, coordination, and the systematic application of strategic thinking to existential challenges. "We didn't just survive the apocalypse," Sarah announced during her final address to the Continental Strategic Defense Network. "We used it to build a civilization that's stronger, smarter, and more resilient than anything that existed before. The zombies taught us that survival requires strategic thinking, coordination, and collective defense. Now we've built a society that embodies those principles at every level. Dead America has been reborn as Strategic America, and we're ready for whatever comes next." As the sun set over the rebuilt landscape of strategic communities, defensive installations, and coordinated networks that now defined American civilization, Sarah Chin knew that humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They had learned from an existential crisis and used that knowledge to build a better world. The war against the zombies was over, but the strategic civilization they had built would endure forever.